No one ever sat you down and said, the way your mind works is rare. Instead, you got the opposite. You think too much. You're overanalyzing. Why can't you just let things go? And after hearing that enough times, you started believing it. That maybe the way you process things is a problem. That maybe a normal mind doesn't work like yours. But here's what no one told you. Not every brain does what yours does. Most brains take in information and move on. Yours takes in information, pulls it apart, finds the pattern inside, connects it to things from years ago, and builds something no one asked it to build. That's not a flaw, that's a rare mind doing what it was designed to do. And today, I'm going to prove it. 10 things. If you experience even half of them, your brain works differently than most people will ever understand. If you spent years wondering why your mind won't slow down, subscribe. This channel was built for exactly that question. And what you're about to hear might be the first time someone described your mind accurately. Thing 1. You think in layers, not lines. Someone tells you something simple, a sentence, a few words. And while most people hear those words and respond, your mind is already running on a completely different level. You hear the words, but you also catch the slight change in their voice between the first half of the sentence and the second. You notice the word they chose and the word they almost used. You connect what they just said to something they mentioned weeks ago, something they probably forgot they ever told you. And all of this happens in about 2 seconds, without effort, without trying. Most people process conversations like a single line. One thing leads to the next. Simple, direct. Your mind doesn't move in lines, it moves in layers. Every piece of information hits you on multiple levels at the same time. The words, the meaning underneath, the emotional weight, the context, and the patterns that connect it to things only your mind still remembers. Psychology calls this multi-dimensional cognitive processing. Research suggests that certain minds naturally operate with a wider field of simultaneous awareness. They don't just hear, they interpret, cross reference, and build meaning in real time. And here's what most people don't realize about this: it's not something you learned, it's not something you practice. Your mind just does it automatically. Every conversation, every interaction, every single day. You've probably never explained this to anyone because from the outside, it just looks like you're listening. But you're not just listening, you're processing reality on a level that most minds never access. And that's the first proof. Think too. Your brain builds invisible frameworks. Nobody taught you. There's something else your mind does that you may have never put into words. You observe things, situations, people, outcomes. And without anyone teaching you, without reading a book or taking a class, your brain quietly builds a framework around what you observed. Here's what that looks like in real life. You watch two or three friendships around you slowly fall apart. You don't study it, you don't take notes. But somewhere in the background, your mind puts the pieces together and arrives at something like this: relationships break. When one person changes at a speed the other person can't match. And the one who stays behind feels left. Not because of distance, but because of direction. Nobody taught you that. No one handed you that insight. Your brain built it from raw observation, and now it runs silently in the background, applied to almost every relationship you see. Psychologists describe this as spontaneous schema construction. It's when a mind doesn't wait to be taught. It watches, collects, and organizes information into internal models automatically. Most people need to be told what something means. Your brain figures it out on its own and stores the answer before you even ask the question. That's the second proof. Your mind doesn't just receive information, it builds systems from it quietly, without instruction, without permission, and the frameworks you've built inside your head are more accurate than most things people learn in the classroom. Thing 3. You notice what disappears, not just what appears. This one is something most people will never understand about your mind. Most people notice when something new shows up: a new behavior, a new tone, a new look. That's normal. That's how most brains work. They detect what appears. Your brain does something different. It detects what disappears. A friend who always asks how you're doing stops asking. Nobody else notices. You do. A coworker who always had energy in meetings goes quiet for 2 weeks. Everyone else assumes they're just tired. You sense something shifted. Someone at a family dinner smiles the whole evening, talks, participates, but you notice something missing. A specific thing they always do, a joke they always make, a tone they always carry. It's not there tonight, and no one at that table catches it, except you. 3 weeks later, you find out they were going through something they hadn't told anyone about. You didn't read their face, you didn't analyze their words, you read their absence. Psychology has a term for this: absence detection. The ability to register not what is present, but what is missing from a known pattern. Research shows that this kind of processing requires a much deeper baseline map of normal behavior. Your brain has to know what someone's pattern looks like to notice when a piece of it disappears. And that means your brain is running a more detailed model of the people around you than most people ever build. You're not being dramatic when you sense something is off. Your brain is picking up on data that other people's minds were never tracking in the first place. That's the third proof. If you recognize yourself in those first three, something is already becoming clear. Your mind doesn't just think too much, it thinks differently, on more levels, in more directions, with more detail than most people will ever use. And the fact that no one ever pointed this out to you doesn't mean it isn't real. It just means no one around you was equipped to see it. Thing four, your mind runs background threads you don't control. You've experienced this more times than you can count. You're stuck on a decision, a problem, something that doesn't have a clear answer. You think about it, circle around it, get nowhere. So you stop trying, you do something else, clean the house, go for a drive, start cooking. And then, out of nowhere, the answer shows up, fully formed, clear, like it was waiting for you to stop looking so it could finally arrive. That wasn't random, that was your brain working on the problem without your permission. Cognitive researchers call this the incubation effect. When your conscious mind steps away, your brain doesn't stop working. It continues processing the problem underneath, running what scientists describe as unconscious parallel threads. Most people's minds stop working on a problem the moment they stop focusing on it. Yours doesn't. Your brain keeps assembling, keeps connecting, keeps testing possibilities in the background, while your hands are busy with something else entirely. And the moment one thread finds the answer, it pushes it to the surface. That sudden flash of clarity in the middle of doing nothing, that wasn't luck. That was your mind doing what rare minds do. It never fully stops working. Even when you think it has. Thing five, you experience time differently. There's something about the way you experience time that most people would find hard to believe. When you're deeply engaged, genuinely absorbed in something that holds your full attention, time scanner. 4 hours feel like 30 minutes. You forget to eat. You don't check your phone. The world outside your focus simply stops existing. But when you're forced into something that doesn't match your depth, something shallow or repetitive or meaningless to you, time stretches. 15 minutes in a conversation that doesn't go anywhere feels like an hour. A meeting that has nothing to do with you feels like it will never end. Same brain, same day, completely different experience of time. Research in cognitive psychology calls this attention dependent temporal distortion. The brain's sense of time is directly connected to the depth of processing it's engaged in. When your mind is fully absorbed, it loses track of external time because all of its resources are directed inward. And here's what that reveals about your mind. Your brain doesn't run at one speed, it adjusts based on depth. When the input is deep, time collapses. When the input is shallow, time expands. Your mind is literally built to go deep. And when the world doesn't let it, everything feels slower. You're not impatient. You're not bored easily. Your brain just operates at a depth that most situations don't reach. And that mismatch between your mind's depth and the world's surface is something you've felt your entire life. You just never had a name for it. Thing 6. You decode what's behind what people find funny. This one may surprise you because it's something that happens so fast you might not even realize you're doing it. Someone makes a joke, everyone laughs, you laugh too. But while you're laughing, your brain has already taken the joke apart. You see why it's funny, but you also see what it's built on, the social assumption it's playing with, the insecurity it might be covering, the dynamic in the room that made it land the way it did. You process the surface and the structure at the same time. Most people experience a joke as a single thing, funny or not funny. Your mind experiences it as a system. What made it work? What it reveals about the person who said it? What the laughter around you tells you about what this group finds acceptable. And sometimes that second layer changes everything. What was funny becomes sad. What seemed light becomes heavy. What everyone else heard as a joke, you heard as a window into something deeper. Psychology calls this incongruity resolution at a meta level. Your brain doesn't just process the punchline, it processes the architecture of the entire interaction. You've probably never told anyone you do this because it sounds like you're overcomplicating something simple. But you're not overcomplicating, you're just seeing what's actually there. Layers most people never reach. If these feel familiar, something important is happening right now. You're not just watching a video, you're seeing parts of yourself that have never been described to you before. And that feeling, that quiet recognition, that's what it feels like when someone finally sees how your mind actually works. So here's what I want to ask you. Which one of these hit you the hardest so far? Which one made you stop and think, I've done this my whole life, but never knew it had a name? Tell me in the comments, because I promise you, someone else reading your answer is going to feel less alone because of it. Thing 7. You absorb the emotional weight of spaces. This is one of the things people rarely talk about, and when they do, it's usually dismissed. But you know it's real because you've felt it. You walk into a place. Nobody says anything wrong. Nothing looks out of order, but something feels heavy. Not in a way you can explain, not something you see or hear, just a weight that wasn't there a moment ago. It's not about the people in the room. Sometimes the room is empty, but the energy of what happened there before you arrived is still sitting in the air, and you absorb it. You visit a friend's house, everything seems fine, the conversation is normal, but you leave feeling drained in a way that doesn't match anything that happened. A month later, you find out they'd been going through something difficult for weeks before you came over. Nothing was said, but the space held it, and your mind picked it up. Researchers describe this as affective resonance with environments. It's a form of processing where the nervous system picks up on residual emotional signals in a space, often below the level of conscious awareness. Most people need words to understand what's happening around them. Your mind reads what words never carry. And that's why certain places drain you for no logical reason, and why certain spaces feel safe the moment you walk in, even if you've never been there before. Your mind is reading the world on a level that most people don't have access to. Thing 8. You sense when something is ending before anyone confirms it. There's a kind of knowing that doesn't come from logic, it comes from pattern. You feel it when something in your life is reaching its end, not because someone told you, not because something dramatic happened, but because something inside you already knows. A job that still pays well, a routine that still works, a connection that still exists on paper. But inside, you already feel the shift, like a season changing before the temperature drops. You know it's turning. You can feel the weight of it even while everything around you looks the same. And then, months later, the change happens. The job ends. The relationship shifts. The chapter closes. And everyone around you is surprised. But you aren't, because you felt it a long time ago. Psychology calls this preconscious pattern completion. Your brain has been collecting microsignals over weeks, sometimes months. Small shifts in rhythm, tiny changes in energy, things that individually mean nothing, but together form a picture your conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. Your brain reaches the conclusion before your awareness does. And that's why you sometimes feel like you're living slightly ahead of your own life. You're not predicting the future. You're reading patterns at a speed and depth that most people's minds never operate at. And the bittersweet part of this is that you often know something is ending while you're still in the middle of it. You can feel the goodbye before the words are spoken. That's not sadness, that's depth. And it's the eighth proof that your mind works on a level most people never reach. Thing 9. You see the system behind every surface. When something happens in the world around you, most people see the event. You see the system that produced it. A coworker suddenly leaves. Everyone says they didn't see it coming. You did. Not because you had inside information, but because you saw the structure months ago. The way creative input was slowly being replaced by obedience. The way certain people were rewarded for agreeing and penalized for questioning. The way the company's values on the wall didn't match the decisions in the room. You saw the machine everyone else saw the moment it broke. A trend goes viral, most people share it and move on. You look at it and see the deeper pattern underneath. Why now? Why this format? What cultural anxiety it's responding to? What it says about what people are hungry for that they're not getting somewhere else. You don't stay on the surface because your brain physically cannot. It always goes one level deeper, then another, then another. Psychology calls this systems level pattern recognition. It's the ability to see not just events, but the structures that create events. Research shows that this type of thinking requires the brain to hold multiple variables simultaneously and map the relationships between them. Most minds process the world in events. Yours processes the world in systems. And that's why you often understand situations before they unfold. And why people sometimes look at you like you know something they don't. You do. You see the architecture underneath the surface. And once you've seen it, you can never go back to just seeing the surface again. Think 10. Silence is never silent for you. This is the one that ties everything together. When the world goes quiet, your mind doesn't follow. You're sitting somewhere still, no sound, no input, no distraction, and instead of emptiness, your mind fills the space, not with noise, not with anxiety, but with connections. Ideas that seem to come from nowhere, questions you didn't know you had, threads between things you haven't thought about in months, suddenly weaving together into something that feels almost alive. You're sitting in a park, no phone, no plan, just stillness, and your mind begins to travel. A thought about something you noticed last week leads to a question about a pattern in your life that leads to a completely unrelated idea about something you want to create. None of it was planned. None of it was prompted. It just happened because your brain doesn't need the world to give it something to work with. It generates its own. Researchers call this internally generated cognition. It's a form of processing where the brain produces rich, complex thought activity independent of external input. Most people need stimulation to think. Your mind creates stimulation from nothing. And this is why silence feels different for you than it does for most people. For them, silence is absence. For you, silence is where your mind finally has room to show you everything it's been holding. That's the 10th proof. And maybe the most important one, because it means your mind doesn't just react to the world, it creates inside itself, independently, endlessly, without anyone asking it to. And that is something most people will go their entire lives without ever experiencing. So here's what just happened. You sat through 10 things and you didn't just hear them, you felt them. You recognized yourself in places that no one has ever described to you before. And that recognition, quiet as it is, matters. Because for a long time, the world gave you one word for all of this: overthinking. But that word was never big enough for what your mind actually does. You don't just think too much, you think in layers most people never reach. You build frameworks no one taught you. You read what's missing, not just what's there. You feel rooms, not just conversations. You see systems, not just events. And in silence, Your mind doesn't shut down, it opens up. That's not a problem. That is a rare mind operating exactly as it was built to operate. And the fact that you've carried all of this quietly, without recognition, without anyone ever giving you the proof that what your mind does is real and rare and meaningful, doesn't change what it is. It just means today might be the first time someone finally saw it clearly. And you deserved that a long time ago. If this felt like it was describing your mind, subscribe. This channel is built for people who think on a different level. And tell me in the comments, which of these 10 did you feel the most? Because the moment you name it, it stops being invisible.